So, as I said, I feel quite a kinship with both of you since I'm in the same business, reviewing TVs and other products as well. David, you specialize in TVs. Jim, I guess you might as well?
Yeah, I do a couple of different categories.
So, we just heard from the retailers, and they provide one of the only places where consumers can really experience Ultra HD or any kind of television firsthand. And these two guys certainly do a very good job of it in terms of providing a reasonable environment, with lighting and so on, to see the TV in their best light, so to speak. But other retailers don't necessarily. You've got giant Klieg lights, giant showroom lights, and walls of TVs like this. So another very important way for consumers to educate themselves and go through the decision-making process of which TV do I buy, they depend upon people like us to inform them in terms of our reviews, which I might call professional reviews since we get paid to do it. And we have experience, right? We've done it a lot, so, you know.
He gets paid?
It's all volunteer, that's right. So what is your approach to reviewing so that consumers can make an informed decision?
I'll start. David Katzmaier from CNET. The main thing we do I think that sets us apart from a lot of reviews is that we actually focus on a side-by-side comparison sort of arrangement. So when we go in to publish a TV review, it's not really in a vacuum. You don't just have, the description of the TV and everything like that. You actually have it compared to its peers, whether it's like-priced TVs, similar-sized TVs, similar technologies. There's a reference usually in the lineup as well. So 5 or 6 odd televisions are lined up next to each other in our lab for pretty much every single review. So I think that that's really the only way to compare televisions, to talk about differences in picture quality, because they can be relatively subtle. So that's kind of the basis that we start off with. We also calibrate all the TVs to ISF specifications for a dark room. We also go ahead and compare all the TV's smart features. We compare the design. We do a product video. We have in-depth photography for pretty much all the products. So we try to give each TV its full measure and give everybody a really good idea of what it's like as a product, and also how it performs in person. I shy away from doing videos that try to show picture quality differences on the screen, because I think it's really hard to capture that, and it often becomes very misleading. If you probably go on YouTube and you see people demonstrating artifacts and videos and things like that. I'm telling you, in person, it's hard to capture these things, and you can see them and describe them, and I think be a lot more accurate than you can by showing a video of something like that.
That's another reason I'm happy 3D is sort of going away, because that was always the challenge, is you're throwing a 2D video of a 3D performance, which wasn't so convincing.
Plus, shooting a video of a TV might introduce more artifacts, on its own in that process by itself.
Yeah.
So I'll talk a little bit about our review process.
Yeah, please.
Like David, we review TVs in a comparative environment. One of the big differences with us is that we're doing 30 at any given point. So we have 2 complete labs that are set up that run continuously. This year we'll review about 300 TVs. We buy all of the TVs. One of the good things about buying the TVs, other than the fact is we also auction them off, so we get to buy the TVs at a discount once we're done with the testing of them, is just that if we have a problem, if there's an anomaly that we see in a TV, we'll just go out and buy another TV of the same brand and model to make sure that it's not endemic just to that one TV, that it's an issue that the manufacturer has. So, one of the things I'm sure David's also, has to deal with this is that every year after CES we sit and we sort of, calibrate what do we need to cover in the next year. So we see new features coming out. A couple of years ago we didn't have to cover smart TV, but now we tried to make evaluative judgments in terms of how well a company is doing it. There's tons of content on the TV. How are they managing that interface? How is their remote control doing? We also test for sound quality. There's been a lot of discussion about sound quality and whether TVs, what level of sound should a TV deliver. one of the questions I wanted to ask the retailers, are they happy that sound's gotten worse because it's an opportunity for them to sell an outboard sound system? But at the very least, we think that a TV should provide decent sound. You should be able to hear people talking. It doesn't necessarily have to create that thunderous cinematic experience, but it should be decent, legible sound. Like David, we have high reference TVs that we compare some of the models to, but the great thing is that when you're looking at 30 TVs at a time, you really have a good relative sense of where that TV is performing in relationship to some of the other sets that we're testing.
And one of the most critical aspects that I have thought about, certainly, and I'm sure you guys have too, is the issue of trust, right? Consumers need to be able to trust what we write, and because if they don't, then we're not really providing the service that we need. And one aspect of that, I think, is impartiality. Now, Consumer Reports is famous for not taking ads, right? You buy the TVs that you review. And your business model is more of a subscription base. If you want to see the details of your reviews, then you need to subscribe to the magazine or the website or whatever. CNET is more like most of us, me too, sort of ad-based, and we provide the content for free. So this is more a question for you, David. How do you manage to convey or support that sense of impartiality in the face of the fact that your salary and mine are paid by manufacturers who are buying ads?
Well, impartiality is off the table if the dump truck of money in front of my house is big enough. But that notwithstanding, it's really important for us because we do have gigantic ads, 5 or 6 or 10 ads on a page, however many they want to fit on there. The videos are bookended by ads that you can't skip. There's a lot of things about advertising on our site and in general on the internet that I'm not really psyched about. There's some great ad blocking programs out there that we actually review, which is kind of fun.
That's interesting. You review the programs that will block people from seeing
absolutely.
the ads
and you
on
have
your
to
site.
Get an ad to get the review, so it's
And you recommend the bad ones, right?
I'm getting a headache already.
So that deck is stacked. The real issue is, I think, getting past that. I think people expect advertising when they go on the internet. They expect people, to kind of sell them whatever it is. And, most people are trained to just scroll right past that and get to the meat. And we do, I think, a pretty good job of presenting our impartiality. We have an extensive how we test document that goes through pretty much everything that we do in the test process. And if anybody of you've read it, I apologize. It's ridiculously long and boring. But there's some nice pictures in there, too, so you can see our lab. But that's really...
It's a very cool lab, actually.
We have to, get that out to people because you have to overcome that initial sort of bias that people have that's, frankly being fought on a daily basis by, us at CNET. Like, there's people that work across the aisle that their job is to sell advertising, and I know them, and, we have drinks together and stuff like that. They're great people. But, when I get to work, I don't talk to them. I don't, make any decisions based on anything that happens from them. And our higher-ups are very cognizant of that. There's nobody that does both sides of the aisle in our company.
No.
And that's kind of a really good thing. And I have layers of bureaucracy above me that are basically designed to keep me away from those guys. So
the Chinese wall, we've sometimes called it.
They walk into my lab and they can see what's going on just like anybody else. And it's incredibly impartial. And the thing about the internet that's incredibly transparent. So as soon as something like that happens, if there is a breach of trust in any way, or if, for example, I'm seen as being more or less partial to a brand or technology or whatever it is, it's going to come out pretty quickly, and I'm going to get accused of it, and I'm going to have to defend myself. So that's always the standard against what I'm working, is to try and make sure that I can defend my views and tell people exactly why I'm writing what I'm writing.
I don't have a ton to add because of how we're set up. Right. The issue for us really is more that people come to us because they trust the impartiality of what we're doing. We actually have no reason at all to favor a company over another. And I have worked for other companies in my past and reviewed for trade magazines that took advertising. And that's a really nice thing from my perspective, is I never have a publisher saying, I hear you're doing an article on this sort of thing. Would it be possible to include this company? So we don't have to deal with that. And one of the other good things, I think, too, is that because we buy all of the products, we're not on a waiting list for a manufacturer. So if we've treated someone unkindly, it doesn't mean that now we're at the bottom of the list to get that cool new TV. And so that's been a real benefit to us, just because we don't have to be on that list and be afraid of what we say because there's a possible repercussion.
It's another thing that I've dealt with a lot in my career, which is that manufacturers, to you and to me, supply the TVs. And one of the questions that often comes up is, how do you know they haven't gone in and tweaked it and made it perfect for you and not representative of what somebody might buy in the store?
That's a really good question, because I'm sure they have. In fact, I know there's QA labs whose entire purpose is to do that. So, long story short, I kind of expect that, and I try to get around it as best I can. For example, I always recalibrate the TVs myself. I start from a zero ground as much as I can. If they've gone in and done some, really nefarious tweaking to try and get a particular sample to look even better for me, it's really difficult for me to tell.
Yeah, it's almost impossible, I think. But I think you're right. Hitting the reset button and starting from as close to scratch as you can.
It's also worth noting that on occasion, CNET does buy review samples. We bought a handful last year. We buy samples that we can't get through the standard means of manufacturers giving them to us. So that's always kind of out there. I've used that to tell manufacturers, hey, look, you can send this, but if it doesn't come in a particular time frame, I'm going to just go ahead and buy it. And I've done that with a few TVs. And sometimes I'll buy, the exact same model to try and, figure out whether, something is representative or not. So it's an issue. It's nothing that I can say that we're dealing with it comprehensively as somebody like Jim. But,
we also have that issue because about a year and a half ago, we started buying some pre-production samples. We wanted to be the first people to test 3D TVs or an OLED TV. So we're actually buying that pre-pressed sample. Now, we will not put that into our ratings, but we do buy the TV and we test it and we do a first look on it. But then we do, as soon as that TV is available at retail, we will buy that TV at retail and then we'll include it in our ratings.
Well, how can you buy a pre-production TV, though? I mean, it's not for sale by
It's
definition.
direct from the manufacturer. So if there's a technology that's so new, we will actually purchase. We don't accept loaners or anything, but we will buy the TV at its projected retail cost and review it and do a first look on it, but it does not go into our ratings because we want to be comfortable that that was actually a TV performing like it's going to be performing when it's at retail, and then we go out and buy that TV and test it and put it into our ratings that way.
That's certainly something I've tried to avoid, is testing pre-production units, because you don't know what's going to happen between then and the time something can actually come out. One more question before I try and get some audience questions is, we're professionals, but then there's this large and growing body of user reviews on Amazon and all kinds of places. AVS Forum, for example, has a lot of user reviews of product. What is the value of these user reviews as compared to professional reviews? I'm thinking particularly about maybe somebody had a bad day, or somebody had a bad unit that isn't indicative of a general trend within a product, and yet they slam the TV and send people away.
Yeah, I'll jump into this one, just because, user reviews at first for us, like, well, how do you deal with it? What if they say something different from what we've said? Yeah. But what we found, and David, you might find this to be true, is very rarely do people differ with our judgments on the performance of the TV. And in fact, what they're able to do is to present some information about the product that we're not good at. For example, we do brand reliability studies, but we don't do it at the model-specific level. And so we sell our TVs after we're done testing them. We don't keep them for long-term reviews. And so sometimes there'll be anecdotal evidence about TVs that may have issues in terms of longevity. There may be some user experiences. We look at them and we spend 5 weeks on all the TVs we test. But if you spend 3 months or a year with a TV, your experience is going to be a little bit different. So we really see these as possibly, and we're figuring out, trying to figure out ways to integrate user reviews within our site to provide that different balance. But the big issue that we thought we would have is, they're going to totally differ with what we said about certain TVs, and in fact, from a performance standpoint, that's very rare.
Yeah, I mean, we have on CNET user opinions that are starred just like our regular ratings, and there was a big argument back in the day when I actually said, these look just exactly like professional reviews except they're blue instead of red. There's 5 stars, how can you tell who's who? And actually some of these users are incredibly well informed, and they actually have really good opinions about the products. I'm with Jim. Most of the time they agree with what I say. If they don't, I just ban them. Just kidding. But at the end of the day, it provides a lot more sort of backup and a lot of extra information. I think in addition to user opinions on the internet, comments are actually on some, taken in moderation can actually be pretty informative too, because the discussion goes back and forth as opposed to just one person giving a review. I've said in the past to people at CNET, I think our principal competition isn't necessarily other reviewing sites, but it's actually Amazon with their user opinions, because they actually do a really good job of collating them and surfacing the ones that people like the best and having voting systems and all that stuff. And they actually rely on that. That's their principal editorial content. That can be a double-edged sword, obviously, if something that's really entertaining becomes, just because it's entertaining, the thing that everybody trusts. But by and large, I think it's a very democratic process, especially if you get a large number of user reviews and a large number of complaints about a particular product or, something like that. It's a big red flag. And we look at that and take that into account in our reviews process. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to sit around and worry that, the users, by and large, are saying that, something is not as good as I think it is, because I have direct experience, and that's kind of the best I can base my stuff on, not necessarily some third party or hearsay.
Jimmy said something real interesting about how end users often have a longer experience with the product than we do. I mean, we get the product for a few weeks or a month or 5 weeks or whatever, but some problems might not manifest themselves or appear right away. And so as professional reviewers, we wouldn't even see that.
Right, and so that's why we feel that there's really a good use for those kinds of things. So, for example, with certain brands, whenever I recommend a TV, I get a lot of mail. Oh, these TVs break after a year and a half, or the day after the warranty. And so those are the kinds of things that we can then continue to track. And in fact, one of the things that we were thinking of doing internally is that, as I mentioned, whenever everything we test from cars to TVs, we auction off to our employees. And so people are buying these TVs, and so we're starting to think that maybe part of the auction process is that you sign up to give us a yearly report on that TV just to gather some anecdotal evidence.
That's a great idea.
So I put it in the suggestion box, and if it's good, I'm $50 richer. So we'll see if I made $50 on that.
Very good. Very good. Okay, well, let's see if anybody in the audience has any questions. I don't see any hands coming up. Oh, my God. What am I going to do? Let's talk some more. Okay. Well, if anybody... Oh, Marge has a question. Go ahead.
You talked about user reviews. A lot of people I know find that 90% of a lot of stuff on the internet is wrong. Now, you have 2 brand names. Everyone knows Consumer Report, CNET. Do you think the consumer today has an easier time buying information online, or more difficult? And also, comment on this. The problem with user reviews is they only have one product. You test everything. You have the perspective of knowing, here's what the Sony TV set did, here's what the LG TV set do. You compare them. Are user reviews valuable because they don't compare? These people don't own everything. They don't get to test everything.
Are user reviews more valuable or less valuable than professional reviews, primarily because the user doesn't have the comparative experience with a bunch of different TVs?
Yeah, I mean, as long as you know that, and all those are really good points. At the end of the day, you have to, as someone who's using user reviews as a point of data, you have to kind of take that into account. I've noticed, for example, that user reviews are predominantly very positive about TVs because the guy just dropped $1,000 or $500 and they don't want to look like a jerk. Because, so there's always that factor of, I just bought something awesome and maybe I got a good deal on it, so I'm going to brag about it at Amazon or whatever. And those are certainly be taken into account. And yes, I'd like to say humbly that I've seen probably more TVs than most of the reviewers at Amazon, and that's a really big factor because I actually know whether the picture quality is good or not. But again, what you see, and Jim alluded to this, in user reviews is not necessarily, they don't really talk about picture quality because a lot of them go, you know what, I just bought this TV, it looks so much better than that 25-inch thing I got for free with my sofa. This is... great. So they're really happy with the picture, but then they turn around and say, oh, the Wi-Fi doesn't connect, or it doesn't have HBO Go, so I have to buy a Roku, something like that. So those sorts of issues are a lot more prominent with user opinions. And honestly, I've got to say, over the years, they've gotten less and less people complaining about Wi-Fi connectivity, less complaining about lack of apps, less, and turning to stuff like, well, it doesn't play my MKV files natively or whatever. So.
And the only other thing I'd add to that is, it sort of reminds me, in a previous life, I was running a music company, and we were having lots of independent artists have music on the site. And in the very beginning, it was just like, we have to get more music on our site. And the problem then became that we have too much music on our site, and people couldn't find it. And so I think that one of the things that's happened is there are so many different users who are putting in reviews in different places. There's so much information out there that people are really looking for trusted filters. Because, do you believe this website versus this website? Does this guy know what he's talking about? So there's just a real lot of noise out there. And I think that sites like CNET and Consumer Reports will help people act as a filter and say, well, we know what these guys know what they're talking about. And then what I found also from a personal experience is a lot of people want affirmation after the fact about their product. They want to feel good that they made the right decision. And so a lot of the user reviews have that element to it. It's like, yeah, I bought the right TV and these guys agree with me.
Yeah, I've gotten that email so many times. I just bought the LG whatever. Is it a good decision? And I can tell them. But I think one of the things that Jim brings up that's really important that we do that you don't get on a user opinion, except for maybe somebody's half-ass filling in of 4 or 5 stars, is the in-depth ratings and the things that CR does really well. I think we do a really good job of it too. Is summarizing everything that we've spent all these hours and dollars testing into numbers and into graphics that people can understand. On the internet, there's an expression TLDR, too long didn't read, which is getting unfortunately more and more common because people have less and less of attention span. I write, sometimes 6,500 word reviews. People aren't going to get to the bottom of that they're going to read the top, they're going to read the bottom line, they're going to read, these sorts of parsed out pieces of information. Exactly. So the ratings are really important.
Yeah. The only other thing I would add too is that, the one thing that's hard for a user review to capture is whether what they're talking about is important to someone. Because different consumers want different things. And so one of the things that both CNET and Consumer Reports do really well is we give you a very broad overview of what the experience of owning that TV is like. So if you care about the internet capability, we spend a lot of time talking about that. If you care about picture quality, we could bore you to tears in terms of the testing results that we get on those things. So for us, one of the things I think that just is a little bit different is that different consumers are going to look to reviews for different things, and when you're able to provide a really broad, comprehensive review of that TV, you're going to satisfy more people.
I wanted to ask you about top picks, buyer's guides, whatever you want to call it, the list of products of TVs in this case that you have put at the top of your list. Because that, I think, is another thing, along with ratings, that potential buyers, shoppers are going to go look at particularly. I don't need to read all these TV reviews. I just want to know what are the ones you recommend most.
Yeah, for us, because we don't have the luxury of reviewing 300 TVs a year, the process actually starts by choosing which TVs to actually review. And once you actually do choose a TV to review, that TV becomes special in its own way because, hey, you're excluding 9 out of 10 of the other TVs. So once you get this stable of TVs to review, then certain TVs end up floating to the top. At CES, we generally can identify which TVs are going to be the best of the year pretty quickly, and at least in terms of picture quality, which is easy, but other factors as well, for value, for example, and going through and making sure you review those TVs and making sure that the ratings are cogent across the board within a particular year is probably the most important thing, because people buy TVs at the end of the year, which is lucky for us because it takes us that long to review that many. And when you get to September, October, November, you better have a good list of recommended TVs, and that list better be pretty short because, again, TLDR, people want to know what to buy, and they don't want to give, they want to have like 50 different selections.
And despite reviewing more TVs, I think that if David and I were to sit down in February and say, which TVs do you want to buy this year, we would have the same list. So we might buy more within a series, and and actually in different series, we'll buy the 40-inch, the 55 and 60-inch, because one of the things that's happening, especially as you get to larger screen sizes, is we're starting to see manufacturers shop for panels. So all of a sudden, a company that had IPS panels and had very wide viewing angles, they're buying a 70-inch set that's not an IPS panel, and we know their source sourcing it there. So we're trying to buy those additional screen sizes now just because the business has changed and people are sourcing panels where they can get them, where the supply is best, where they're cheapest, whatever. So that's one of the luxuries that we have in being able to buy multiple TVs. But you know, we too need to make those same decisions. We can't buy every set, but we sit down and say, you know, these are going to be the demand products. A lot of times we'll look at successful models from the prior year and say, oh, that was such an awesome TV. Let's see if they're going to continue with it. You know, but I think that, you know, I think that we would agree pretty much on, you know, the 50 TVs that we need to get in to review. It's, you know, it's part science and part art.
But it's pretty obvious for when you go home from CES, you know, you've kind of seen them and you kind of go, oh yeah, that's important. I want to try that one.
And nobody reads the CES post reports that we do. They're literally the least amount of traffic of any articles we do the entire year. But little word to the wise that we work really hard on them, and they actually can summarize pretty quickly and easily and predict what we're going to actually pay attention to throughout the year.
And the one thing I have to temper is that, you know, we go there and we're looking for the absolute newest technologies, the expensive TVs and all, but we also have to remember that those are probably not the sets that most people are buying. So in terms of the spread of things that we review, we want to really talk about the new technologies as they emerge. So we bought a bunch of the Ultra HD TVs last year. We bought, you know, we're buying an OLED this year. But we also need to buy TVs that are price points where most people are buying them. So, you know, we're all into the technology part of it and we want to see the new things, but we also have to remember what our audience is actually
Where
buying.
the value is. Yeah. You had mentioned to me offline about the importance of secondary and tertiary brands, right? I mean, we had up here earlier today the TV manufacturers, which we'd call the primary brands, the Sonys, the Samsungs, the LGs, the Toshibas, and so on. But what about the secondary and tertiary brands? Do you take a look at them? Do they represent good value?
No, we look at them because a lot of them are found in mass market retail chains where they sell a lot of TVs. And you know, it's an interesting question for us because clearly what they're doing is pushing price points. So with some of the retailers, they say we need a TV that we can, a 60-inch TV we can sell for under $1,000, and then people line up to try to produce it. In a general statement, what I can say is that the secondary and tertiary brands do not perform as well. If you look at our ratings, they're toward the bottom. So you're getting what you pay for. The great news for consumers and in the advice that we give them is one of the great things that's really happened is the major brands used to not go after the low-hanging fruit. They didn't go after that low end of the business. They abdicated that part of the market. There wasn't a lot of profit in it. But almost every major brand is now targeting those retail channels that they ignored previously, or they're selling at price points that they weren't looking for. And so there's no reason to have to buy a bad TV for a little bit less money, because if you spend a little bit more, you'll get a decent one.
There you go. Very good. One last question. The UHD TVs available today, we've been hearing a lot about the pixel resolution, but also about temporal resolution, frame rate, dynamic range, wide color gamut, and so on. None of these things are completely finalized. What do you say to someone who asks, should I buy a UHD TV today?
I say, is it a good TV? Which TV is it? Because at the end of the day, the UHD TVs are pretty much the same as the 1080p TVs were. The only difference is they're putting the good technology improvements, whether it's a panel with 4 times the pixels, or local dimming, which actually does improve picture quality, or other factors. They're putting their best technology into that high-end TV. It's exactly the same thing happened with 3D, where the best TVs happen to be 3D TVs. In this case, the best TVs are happening to be the UHD TVs, especially now that plasma's gone away. So we're seeing, all of the high-end LCDs that we've seen this year actually do perform better than the 1080p TVs. It has nothing to do with their resolution per se. It's more to do with the other technology and the freedom the manufacturers have to put better picture quality technology into the TVs, because they are at a premium.
Yeah, I mean, I thought of the 3D analogy as well. It's, it was sort of like you were going to get 3D whether you wanted it or not, just because it was in those premium, high-performing products. So if you're the customer who tends to like to buy those high-performing products, I feel like some of the issues that we had last year with HEVC decoding and HDMI 2.0 aren't the issues this year that they were last year. So go ahead and do it, but also understand this is an industry that rewards procrastination. If you can hold off, if you don't have to buy a TV, it'll probably be a little bit cheaper. There'll be more content next year. So it really comes down to a discretionary decision by that person. Who are you? What kind of viewer are you? And do you have to replace a TV right now and you want to future-proof that purchase? Or are you sort of interested in the technology, but maybe it makes more sense for you to wait a year?
Fantastic. Well, I think that brings us to the end. Let me bring Jeff Tully back up, and thanks to our panel.